have to say, thankfully, I didn't play a ton of really awful AAA release games this year, but that doesn't mean there weren't plenty of lesser-known release titles that ended up being so bad that, well, they will stand the test of time as some of the worst I've ever played. So, without further ado, here are the 10 worst games of 2016, of course, in my opinion. Mario Kart is the king of kart racing, but of course it's not on PlayStation, but we do have Coffin Dodgers. This is a game where you get to race as old people against death, trying to stay alive going from track to track. It has a very short adventure mode with really boring overall track designs, only a couple of which I can even remember after a few months of playing the game. And then there's also just the weak weapons. Factor in a really kind of annoying soundtrack that will get into your head and just make your ears bleed after a while. Coffin Dodgers is one kart racer you need to avoid. There wasn't a lot of hype going into the new Ghostbusters game released this year, and probably for good reason. The up to 4-player game was just so bland and boring, blasting the same ghost on loop throughout each level, and the game itself being really short, and heck, was near impossible to die at points while playing it. The overall fun factor got drowned out by just its bland repetitive gameplay, and with a price tag of $49.99, you have to wonder why Activision did this other than just to gouge the fans of Ghostbusters out there. Well, I ended up buying it, hating it, and now it's my 9th worst game of 2016. The Resident Evil series has fallen on hard times, and Umbrella Corps is a great example of why Resident Evil is far from its glory days. It was a team-based online shooter, well, mostly online. It had a single-player campaign that was utterly useless, with some of the most boring missions over the game's few maps that were included in the package. The game's modes online were also kind of given to you at random. You only had a couple of choices, and for the most part, it was just kind of a random free-for-all. You would get a new objective every time a new game started, and you couldn't even pick which games you wanted to play. Factor in that the actual online combat with other players was just an absolute glitchy technical mess. In fact, the hook weapon that was instant kill was used more often than anything else I saw while playing online. Umbrella Corps is one of the worst Resident Evil games ever, and definitely one of the worst of 2016. You may not expect much from a monster truck game, but there actually are a handful of good ones throughout the years. Monster Jam Crush It is not one of them. Featuring absolutely no multiplayer whatsoever, a trick competition that has no tricks, you're just judged on how much air you have, and you can't even crush the cars. The game is called Monster Jam Crush It, and you can't even crush the cars, a staple of monster truck games. There's also the whole hill racing, which eats up most of the gameplay, and the fact is, doing every single event in the game will only take you maybe 2 hours at most, and they want to charge a price of $19.99 for this wonderful experience. But unfortunately, Monster Jam Crush It, well, I'd rather crush the disc. Putting humor into a game can be a risky endeavor because you really have to not only write it well, but also have a pretty good game behind it. Zenith did not do this. It's an action RPG that's more hack and slash than action RPG Diablo-esque by any means. The humor, well, it is funny at times, in fact, it even made me laugh out loud. It's the overall sluggish gameplay, repetitiveness, and awful load times in this one that ends up making Zenith one of the worst experiences I had in 2016. Back to more racing, Grand Prix Rockin' Racing. Wow, is this game awful. The controls are some of the worst for any racing game I've ever played. Even with maxed out stats in the car, which you start at 0 stats, I still never felt like I have full control of the car. It also has some of the most annoying announcing ever, with the same phrases repeated on loop over and over again. In fact, I think I heard some phrases up to 5 or 6 times in the same race. There's only 10 racetracks included, which you'll blow through in just a matter of moments, and no real multiplayer or any other features to make this game really enjoyable playing. Overall, Grand Prix Rockin' Racing is one of the worst racing games I've ever played. 5-Star Wrestling Regenesis is one of the worst wrestling games I've ever played. It uses kind of these parody of wrestlers to put them in the game so they could include like real life wrestlers, but overall they just end up looking like a bootleg version of the real stuff, and the gameplay itself though, the core of it all, just isn't that fun. There's so many clipping issues and hit detection issues. So many times my characters were missing things for no reason, diving through things and going through the ring and other ringside things. In fact, even sometimes my characters would freeze or the AI would just completely break and not even attack me, just staying on the outside. 5-Star Wrestling Regenesis, it's cool to see a WWE style game without it being WWE, but man, does it need to be done better than this. Please, some developer out there, bring back the Fire Pro Wrestling series. Now we're getting to the truly bad games on this list. Orc Slayer is one of the worst looking games on the PS4, but graphics aren't everything. The gameplay is also bad, with repetitiveness of just having an infinite shot crossbow, firing at the same orcs pretty much on repeat as towers slowly decimate themselves as you're destroying the orcs. The music, sound effects will probably get on your nerves after just a short amount of time, and there are some funny moments like exploding pigs or a giant chicken, but this is nothing that's going to be able to make Orc Slayer worth checking out. Well, other than the easy platinum that you're able to get if you decide to actually pick up this game. It also breaks at times, glitches, and a few occasions I had to restart the game as things just completely broke on me. Orc Slayer, wow, what an experience. While I think Orc Slayer was a worse playing game, Dogchild makes the list at 2 over Orc Slayer because it was a more expensive game and should have been better. It won some kind of indie contest in Europe and had an interesting premise of a guy and a dog working together to platform their way and take out enemies, trying to find out what happened to the main character's parents. What you end up getting are some of the worst controlling, worst platforming segments which half the time don't even work at all. In fact, there's one point where you clearly can jump to a platform and your character will just flat out die with no indication on why your character ended up dying. There was even a point where I ran around and picked up a collectible and my character just dropped dead once I picked it up. I found out later it's because there was actually supposed to be poison gas on the field, but I couldn't see it because it didn't load. Dogchild is one of the worst, most frustrating platformers I've ever had the disprivilege of playing. All the games on this list are bad, but there's one that stands above the rest as one of the worst video games ever put into the hands of gamers. Soulbrain, Night of Darkness. Not only is it a very bad playing bland game, you have the fact that you're pretty much going level to level, defeating horde after horde of enemies, and once you defeat them all, you'll move on to the next stage. And you keep repeating until you get through everything. The problem is, you're unable to save, so if for some reason the game crashes, which it can, or you end up quitting, you have to start over all the way from the very beginning. And then, there's the fact that enemies can actually appear and spawn inside of walls or mountains or in the ground, being unable to be killed by your main character, at which point, you're stuck. And the only way in order to kind of get things going again is by restarting the game and starting back from level 1. After attempting on multiple occasions to get farther and farther into the game, eventually I just had to give up as I couldn't play it anymore. But that's not even the worst part about the game. No, the worst part is everything was stolen for this game. You had like weapons and armor from Skyrim, sound effects for the main character from Super Smash Bros., a font from The Legend of Zelda, a game over screen from DeviantArt, I'm pretty sure, music from Ori and the Blind Forest. Some of the best games in the modern era had assets stolen from them in order to be put into this mess, absolute mess of an experience. The thing is, you can't even buy it now, as thankfully Sony did do the right thing and remove it from the PlayStation Network. It was charging at least $14.99 in order to actually play it, which was an unbelievable price for what you ended up getting. But for those who did buy it, like myself, and play it, man, what a journey it was. So there you have it, the 10 worst games of 2016. Which games didn't make the list that should have, or which ones do you agree with? Make sure you comment down below to let me know. I'm sure there's some other really awful games that I didn't even get a chance to play, but if you end up putting them down, I'll probably end up checking them out at some point as I'm a glutton for punishment. I decided this year to make 2 separate lists for most disappointing and worst games, as there's just so many that I thought were god-awful that need to be talked about, so that's why I decided to do 2 lists this year. But anyway guys, that's gonna wrap up this countdown. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed. Let's hope that 2017 is a better year for the PSN, but with the way things are going, I have a feeling we're gonna have a lot of really bad games, just like we did in 2016.